I've got Jeffrey Lord with us tonight. I'm going to bring him on the show right now. How you doing, brother?
Hello there, my friend John. How are we?
Yo, we're doing well. We're doing well. And listen, to a lot of people who don't know you, and I've been fortunate enough to get to know you over this last year, slowly and incrementally, and just admire your background, your work, the track record that you've had. Like I said, dating back to the Reagan administration, I think of all the great stories and all the great things that you could tell somebody. One day certainly wouldn't be enough to get all the stories that are in that head of yours. But again, to folks who don't know you, I just want to lay this out real quick. I mentioned that Jeff is an author. This is his latest book, Swamp Wars by Jeffrey Lord. I want you to go out and check this book out, folks. Jeff also, just so you know, he wrote What America Needs, The Case for Trump, and also The Borking Rebellion. And it's interesting. I want to talk about Swamp Wars too, but tell everybody a little bit about the Borking Rebellion. We were talking a little bit about it, and I was fascinated by it.
Well, when I was in the Reagan White House, and I'm not a lawyer, but nonetheless, I wound up getting involved in the confirmation fights for 5 Supreme Court justices, including the famous Borking of Judge Robert Bork, who was a considerably well-qualified conservative judge, but Democrats and liberals went after him and really torched him because he was so conservative. And that conjured up the name, not from me, but in the day, that when you go after a judicial nominee, you are, quote unquote, borking them.
Right.
Putting out all sorts of untruths, etc. Well, time
word.
went on, and when I was out of government, this was 2001, one of my best friends from college, his name is Brooks Smith. He had been nominated successfully by President Reagan to be on the Western District of Pennsylvania, the federal bench, and over time he had become the chief judge, and he was very well liked and very well respected in the judicial community. President Bush nominated him to be on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and people went crazy. And there was this very curious thing that happened that sort of got me moving on this. Brooks was told that as per procedure, he was going to get a call from President Bush formally telling him that he was going to be nominated the next day for the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. I was at the beach on Eastern Long Island where my parents were, and he calls and tells me, and I said, Brooks, this is fabulous. This is terrific. Whatever you need, I'll help. Well, the next day was September 11th, 2001. Suffice to say, there was no phone call from President Bush. He was immediately otherwise occupied. And as time went on, Brooks went down to there's a building there on Capitol Hill near the Supreme Court that runs the administrative section of the federal court system, not just the Supreme Court, but all federal courts. And Brooks was in there to do some administrative work. And one of the staff people came up and said, Judge Smith, you should see this. And brought on his or her computer. And there was a full-scale attack, a television commercial or whatever, attacking Brooks Smith, not unlike Judge Bork had been attacked. And my friend called me and said, what do I do? And I was alarmed. And I said, well, the first thing to know is you can't do anything. You're a sitting federal judge. I said, but I've been through this 5 different times with Supreme Court nominees. Just give me the name of any of your 2 friends in the Pittsburgh legal community, and I'll take it from there. He gave me the names of 2 terrific women. One was a Republican, one was a Democrat. And I called them, got in touch. They are the ones who really banded together and formed this group of Pennsylvania attorneys, most of them women, and launched these were no dummies. They had their contacts in the American Bar Association, in the Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania legal community, and in the broader legal community. And we got a real fight going. We got help from Pennsylvania Senior Senator Arlen Specter and our junior senator at the time, Rick Santorum, And the bottom line is we got him confirmed in a highly contentious fight. So by then I was starting to write. So I took notes through all of it. And then I wrote an article at first that was published in the Weekly Standard. And then it became a book, The Borking Rebellion. So that's the tale. If people want to know what goes on behind the scenes when somebody's a hot judicial candidate, you can read the book.
Check out The Borking Rebellion, folks. On top of, like I said, Jeff's most recent book, Swamp Wars. Okay, so we've got The Borking Rebellion. What great history. What a great read for you young people out there. You want to learn some history? Check out The Borking Rebellion. Now, let's talk a little bit about Swamp Wars. What caused you to write that after you had already written What America Needs, the Case for Trump?
Well, I worked for a long time in Washington. I went down there as a young press secretary to Congressman Bud Schuster, the now late Congressman Bud Schuster. Sadly, he passed a couple months ago at the ripe old age of 91. I went down there as his young press secretary, became his legislative director, and then his House Budget Committee staffer, and then moved over to the Senate as executive assistant to U.S. Senator John Hines, our senior senator, Senator Hines from the famous Hines ketchup family.
Right.
And then into the Reagan-Bush presidential reelection campaign, and then into the White House as a political director. And I ended my government career working for Jack Kemp when he was Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in the Bush 41 administration.
I know, by the way, I know his son.
Let's see which one. I'm trying to remember. Gosh.
You're going to now you've got me on the spot. But I know his son. I've met with him, talked with him. We've had many phone conversations. He was an athlete.
Yes. One of his sons played, I think, for the Seattle Seahawks.
He sure did. He sure did.
And but at any rate, if there's anything,
great family though.
Yes, absolutely, outstanding. He was an outstanding dad and all of that. If I learned anything in all of my Washington time, is it really is a swamp, etc. And the way this process kind of works is you get a job in government and you become an expert in whatever you're doing in any of the many departments and agencies. Sure. And then you leave and you join a firm that's filled with half Democrats and half Republicans, and you spend all your time peddling your influence. Where do you think Joe Biden got this idea? It wasn't new to Joe Biden. And it's a very incestuous swamp. And they don't take well to people from outside the swamp. They want you to be part of it and to fall in line and all of this kind of thing.
And why is that? And why is that? Because if you go against it, then everybody that's in line, they're hurt financially, right?
Right. And they, most specifically in this case, did not like Donald Trump because, of course, he'd built his entire career outside the swamp, building his career as a builder, a real estate guy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he comes to Washington feeling justly that he's been elected to upend things in the swamp and get some results and change things. And the swamp goes crazy. They're still going crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And that, in essence, is what my book is all about, is how they do this, the sort of swamp-like ways that they have to go after people, the use of the media. And it's an interesting tale. And eventually I had to leave. I had switched over after the, I always say in 1992, I was at HUD with Jack Kemp in the fall. And then these people, and I always joke that I can't remember their names, Bill and Hillary somebody.
Oh, geez.
And they come along, they win the 1992 election. And what happens procedurally is people like me get a literal letter from the incoming head of White House personnel in the new Clinton administration that says, "Dear Jeffrey, thank you so much for your government service. Be out by noon, January 20th. And with that, you're out of a job, right? And you've got to figure out what you're going to do. And I decided I wanted to go off and write and be in the media. You'll be amused at this, John. I took acting lessons, and
Good for
got
you.
I got cast as an extra in all these big time movies that came to film in Washington. The first one was The Pelican Brief
I
with
remember it well.
Julia Roberts and Denzel Washington. The next one was True Lies with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yep.
Then there was Contact with Jodie Foster and
Another good
Matthew
one.
McConaughey. Mars Attack with Jack Nicholson.
Yes.
And the very last one was The Shadow Conspiracy with Charlie Sheen.
Nice. Nice.
I played a waiter. He played a former presidential aide or a current presidential aide. And I thought, what's wrong with this picture here? But
Well,
I liked it a lot. I also signed up for screenwriting courses at Georgetown, and that was interesting. That we had to write a screenplay in class. So I did, and when it was over, the professor said to me, this was pretty good. Send it to such and such a place, which I didn't really know what this was. It turned out to be the a fellowship program sponsored by the Motion Picture Academy, the Oscars people. And I got, there were something like 5,000, applications or whatever. I made the final 100, and they picked finally 10 people or 5 people. So I didn't make it all the way, but I made it far enough to find out that the Hollywood trades had picked up on the last 100, and I got an agent out of it.
Good.
And then I started writing novels, and then I thought, maybe I should do political commentary. And then suddenly now I'm being published in the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times and all this. And I thought, well, hello, I think this is probably the way to go. And
I tell you, we should do a political thriller together because I have a background in motion picture and acting, and thanks to Mark Cook now producing, as he's been showing me the ropes over the last 10 years. So that's actually my other life. This is my life serving my country, but my other life is my background is in film and television.
Well, I wrote 2. One was a romantic comedy, In Your Dreams, in which a guy somehow gets affected and finds out that whatever he dreams comes true the next day. and then I did a thriller called Guided Missile.
Okay.
And it was all about the first one of the first female pilots of an F-17 or whatever it was at the day.
That's awesome.
So, I really enjoyed it, but it all led me to the bottom line of writing. So now, I do nonfiction books, and I do all these columns and TV commentating and all of that. The TV commentating came about. I was writing columns for the American Spectator, and it was a weekend, and and I'm home in central Pennsylvania. I came home at the time to take care of my aging parents, now gone, but I left Washington. So
sure.
I'm out of it, and I'm writing, and I get this message on my email, Jeffrey, this is BS. Well, what is this? I didn't know. And it was somebody I didn't know at the time, but he worked for Donald Trump, and we happened to have a mutual friend who knew Donald Trump well. And so this guy asked me this guy for our mutual friend for my email. I get it. Well, somebody at the American Spectator had written an article. They'd seen Donald Trump on with Matt Lauer. This is in 2013, in June of 2013. And Matt Lauer says, are you thinking of running in 2016? And he says, yes, I am. So this guy at the American Spectator was not a Trump fan. And he said, writes a column, can't we just ignore Donald Trump? So Trump apparently saw it. Irritated, he has his staff person, reach out to me. And I read the article, and I thought, well, I'll answer this. I don't know Donald Trump, but I like him. I've read his books. I'm going to answer this. So I wrote a column, Never Ignore Donald Trump, and said that, he was an outsider and he had this great career, and that I thought not only could be elected president, but he could be a real game changer. Well, of course, my political friends thought I had taken complete leave of my senses. But shortly thereafter, in comes a letter to the American Spectator headquarters, which is in, I think, Alexandria, Virginia. And it was to me thanking me. And I thought, well, that's nice. But, I didn't think much else of it. Then down the road, I was reading, and I get the thing I love about the American Spectator is as writers, we get to pick our own topic and go with it. And I saw this thing. I was reading the New York Post that the Attorney General of the New York in the day, a man by the name of Eric Schneiderman, a very ambitious New York Pol who wanted to be governor, suddenly starts going after Trump for Trump University. And I've been around the political block, and I thought, no, there's more to this story than that.
Right.
And I investigated, and I found out that he'd been to Trump for a campaign contribution as Attorney General. He got one, but he didn't think it was enough.
Of course.
At least as this story was told to me. He also went to Ivanka and Jared and Don Jr. and more or less the same thing. He didn't think he was being treated respectfully. And again, as I was told the story by a source, it was like that old mafia thing, nice business you got here. You wouldn't want anything to happen to it. So I checked in and found out that he'd been accused of doing this kind of thing with other people not connected to Donald Trump. So I wrote a column, Shakedown Schneiderman. And the next thing you know, I'm sitting at home taking care of my good old 97-year-old mom at that point. The phone rings, and I always say to people, you know how sometimes you recognize a voice and you know it, but you can't place it. And the voice on the other end says, Jeffrey? And I said, yes, this is Donald Trump. So with that, we wound up talking quite a bit. Unbeknownst to me, the American Spectator, we have these American Spectator dinners every fall. And they're, the typical Washington glitzy black tie type thing.
Oh, yeah.
A political figure or two of the day. And for 2013, they had selected Donald Trump and Ted Cruz with another appearance by Gary Sinise, the actor and veteran.
Love Gary Sinise. Love him.
Exactly. So about a week before the event, I got a call from the Trump office. Mr. Trump would like you to fly down with him. And I thought, well, my mom, I'm not sure, and all this. And by chance, I got a call from one of my girl cousins, as I call her, who, and I said, Beth, you'll never believe I just got this call. She says, well, you're going to do it, aren't you? And she says, look, I know the problem. I'll come take care of your mother. You do it. So I got up at the crack of dawn, drove to Washington, which is a mere 2 hours south of me here in central Pennsylvania, hopped the train in New York, went up to Trump Tower. They took me right in to see him. There he was examining this picture of a golf course in the Bronx that he'd opened. There he was with Jack Nicklaus, among others. And he takes me up to, while he changes his shirt, and I go up to the top of the building there with him and his security guy. And then we hop on the plane and fly down. And he says to me afterwards, okay, I'll call you. And I thought, right, well, he calls. And ever after, we hit it off, and I would write about him periodically because I thought he really had a shot at this. And
sure,
lo and behold,
absolutely,
he did.
Absolutely, he did. Folks, we're going to take a real quick break. We'll be right back with Jeffrey Lord. Indivisible with John Stubbins is proud to support my friends Jim and Angela Holland and Set Apart Farms.
Faith-led and family-driven, we're doing things a better way for veterans and their families. For all the ways to get involved, go to setapartfarms.org.
And we're back with Jeffrey Lord. Jeffrey, it's amazing. I just want to just show everybody your book one more time before we move on. Make sure you guys get out and get Swamp Wars. I think it's incredible. And it leads me to my next question. And just real quickly, what the swamp has become, what it's transformed into, from the day that people started recognizing it for what it was to today. Like, for instance, one of the things that really bothers me, we're talking about Supreme Court judges and things like that. The left is going out and, they're showing up at these justices' homes, trying to threaten them and intimidate them and, force them into a decision one way or the other, whether it's abortion or this or that. This kind of thing, it terrifies me because, number one, just common sense says this should not be happening. This should not even be legal. Anybody showing up at a congressman or senator or, the president's house or, a justice, they should be arrested. And it's not happening. And it bothers me. I wanted your take on that real quick.
Yeah, well, I think the problem we have here is that you've got all these professional liberals, as it were, who are in these federal bureaucracies, and liberalism is their first agenda, first, last, and always.
Sure.
I frequently cite an article that appeared in the Washington Post on the front page on January 31st of 2017, 11 days after Donald Trump took office. And it was about resistance from within and about how all these federal bureaucrats were organizing to fight Donald Trump. And they even went so far as to talk to Newt Gingrich, who really understands this issue.
Sure.
And he talks about how in the case at hand, they had infiltrated the Justice Department, and they were more about their own agenda than they were about the bipartisan, implementation of justice. Well, you think of what's just been happening with the Department of Justice and the FBI. This is a real problem.
Yes.
There. And one of the things I always say, I said, this is how the game works. Some congressman wakes up in the morning and he's got a crying child. So he goes into his office and he instructs his legislative staff to write a bill creating the Department of Crying Children. They get the bill passed. Then they build a 10-story building in Washington, stuff it through with filled with union members who are earning six figures. And then all sorts of restaurants spring up around them. People lobby it, etc. That's how the swamp gets created.
Yeah.
And this just goes on and on and on.
And deeper and deeper and more involved. You know what it is? It reminds me a lot of, if I had to try to, because you really hit the nail on the head there. It's kind of like Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals meets Stealth Jihad. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, these two things converging. How can we destroy from within?
Well, it becomes very difficult. I mean, President Reagan, when he was running for president in 1980, was proposing getting rid of the newly created Department of Education and the Department of Energy. They're still there.
Yep, they sure are.
They're bigger than ever. And
the Department of Education, and boy, this great society has been a complete, utter failure in so many ways. Educationally would have to be number one on my list. The Department of Energy, obviously, and so many others. You think about all these different departments and buildings and budgets, and that's where the tax dollars are going. And some of it's, you think about like this idiot out in California, he diverts their water supply, which causes mega problems, mega consequences, to save a smelt about that big. How stupid can you be? It's common sense.
Well, and I think, I would say respectfully to some of the people I've met in government, you need to take a real hard look at what you're doing here.
Right.
The very size of these behemoths and the number of people, thousands of people that are in these bureaucracies and the payroll and all of this kind of stuff all together.
And they tell you, Jeff, that they don't read. They don't even read these bills. So they're signing off on millions and billions of dollars. They don't even know where the money's going.
Well, that's right. And I can tell you, when one of my jobs, as I mentioned, when I was starting out working for Congressman Schuster and I was on the House Budget Committee, we would get these budgets. I don't know if you can see my hands here.
Yeah.
This that high.
Oh, yeah.
And it fell to the staffers to try and work our way through them. But the fact of the matter is most members of Congress had no idea what was in these things. And yet they get passed and, on you go to the next thing. Well, you just do this year after year after year, and therein lies the problem right there.
Exactly.
And I will say this, in all fairness, this is a bit of a bipartisan problem, and I can tell you how it works because I saw it firsthand. President Reagan was newly installed in office when I was working there, and I was working for Congressman Schuster on the Budget Committee. And the president had put forth a whole vast series of budget cuts, tax cuts and budget cuts. So what would happen, and Congressman Schuster represented the then 9th district, which is central Pennsylvania and very conservative, small c conservative. And you would get all these great people, good constituents of his from that area. They'd come to see him in Washington, and the conversation would go something like this. Oh, Bud, we just think, Congressman Schuster, you're just doing a great job. We love you to death. And we certainly love President Reagan. We think he is fabulous. But you know, Bud, this one program in our area in Altoona, you know, we really wish you wouldn't cut that. We really, this is very important. Now, my point is, you take that and you magnify that by 435
exactly
members from both parties,
and that's what's happening.
And this is why we have trillions in debt.
That's right. That's right. Look, we've only got like a minute left. I want to get your comment on what's happening with the Durham investigation, the Durham report. As it's dealing. I mean, look, we know what's happened over with China, with Ukraine, with these dirty deals with the Bidens. The things that they're, like you mentioned earlier, we were talking privately about Biden today, even today, with these messages. I mean, what's your take on this?
Well, I think Joe Biden has got himself some real trouble. You know, I'm one of those people that decades ago caught him plagiarizing Robert Kennedy.
Right.
When I was in the White House with President Reagan, because I was a big Kennedy fan as a kid, and I'd memorize speeches. And I knew he was plagiarizing.
You knew.
Out and it sank his campaign at that point. But I think that they've got this whole deal going, this sort of grift deal. And thank goodness there's a House Oversight Committee with James Comer and the House Judiciary Committee with Congressman Jordan from Ohio. I do think we're going to make some real progress in discovering what's going on here. It's not a pretty picture. And I think, we think Watergate was the granddaddy of these things. I think that maybe this is bigger, but we've got to see.
Well, and not only that, like I said, and we'll talk about this, off the show, but, I'm going after Adam Schiff, and I'm going to bring him in front of the House Ethics Committee because, look, whether it's Paulina Luna or her investigation, or he just got censored last week, Adam Schiff, people like him and Brennan and Clapper, Comey, Strzok, so many of them are the reason why they're here. The way that they treated my friend Carter Page with the FISA warrants, that FISA court's got to change. There's a lot going on here, obviously, that we need to get to the bottom of. But
yes.
But I want to start with Adam Schiff because Adam Schiff, in my mind, he has been just a proponent of lies to the American people that have caused. I can't even measure the damage that he's done through the apparatus of the DNC, the Democratic Party, and all the mouthpieces over there. It just makes me sick, Jeff. Any parting thoughts?
Well, I agree with that. Good luck with it. I mean, I think, there are sufficient people in California that think what he does is just great because he goes after Donald Trump. But the fact of the matter is he said all sorts of stuff and none of it is true.
Right.
None of it.
Exactly.
And for that, I think he should be held accountable by somebody. He's now been officially censured in the House. That's a good thing. But I think there should be more coming down the pike here.
I'm looking forward to it. And I'm hoping to do all I can to be a part of adding that hammer down because I'm tired of the guy. And by the way, real folks, just all during the show, we've been scrolling this. Hopefully you've got it. For Jeffrey Lord to reach Jeff, his website is thejeffreylord.com. His podcast is The Word of the Lord with Jeffrey Lord. And you can also reach him through the American Spectator at spectator.org. And one final thing, again, make sure that you get Jeff's book, The Swamp Wars. I think that especially you young people will find it incredibly informative and educational and teach you quite a bit. That's all for this week. We'll see you next week here on End of This.
Thank you, my friend John.
Yes, sir. And God bless you. God bless your families. And God bless America.
Amen.